So there's a story of the Alter Rebbe, which in honor of his yahrzeit, of his day of passing. There's a story of the Alter Rebbe when the Alter Rebbe was a young man, Shnei Zalman of Liadi, the founder, the first Chabad Rebbe, the founder of Teres Chassidus Chabad, the founder of the teachings of Chabad Chassidus. So the story is that he was a young man in his 20s, and it's important to understand part of the story, that he's a young person. He was asked by his teacher, by his master, his Rebbe, the Magid of Mezritch, to write an updated version of the Shulchan Aruch, of the Code of Jewish Law, which is a masterpiece of work, of halachic work, and to bring in more of the teachings of, within halacha, also the teachings of Kabbalah, from the side, from the spiritual teachings of Torah, the teachings of Dari, etc. And he was in his 20s, and the story is that once he finished a certain part of the Shulchan Aruch, a certain part of this magnum opus that eventually writes, of this very detailed law book, and he put a pamphlet on the table of the Maggid, but he didn't put his name on the book, on this pamphlet. Neither did he tell his teacher that he wrote it. He just put it there on the table. He didn't tell his Rebbe that he wrote it. The Maggid picked up this book, and I guess there were other students in the room while the Maggid did this. And while the Maggid picked up the book, the Maggid asked, who wrote it? Who wrote this text? And the Alter Rebbe responded, I. And the Maggid just completely ignored that statement, as if he didn't hear that statement. Okay, the Alter Rebbe didn't understand why his Rebbe did this, or why his Rebbe didn't respond. But, his Rebbe was his teacher and his master and his Rebbe, so he just accepted it. The next day, the Alter Rebbe was traveling, and he came one evening, in the evening of his travel, he came to a certain inn. And he went into his room, and he was lying down, and he went to sleep. Meanwhile, in the inn, there was a big commotion, because someone stole the money from the innkeeper. I guess the innkeeper had a certain safe, a place that he kept his money, and someone stole the money. Someone that was staying in the inn stole the money. They called the police. They called the authorities, and the authorities showed up. And this was a Jewish inn, so all the people that were staying there were Jewish, or many of the people that were staying were Jewish. So the owner said, we can't find who the thief is, so let's go to rooms, let's bang on the doors, and let's see who looks like a bandit, the someone that stole the money. Meanwhile, the thief himself, who stole this money, was not a very committed Jew, and did not wear a kippah, did not wear a yarmulke, did not wear a covering over his head. But he wanted to pretend that he was a righteous person, so he opened up different doors in different rooms of people, and one door he opened up was the door of the Alter Rebbe. He saw the Alter Rebbe lying there with a very large yarmulke, a very large kippah on his head. So the Alter Rebbe was asleep. He pulled the yarmulke off the Alter Rebbe's head, I guess very gently, and he lied down in his own bed with this very big yarmulke. The police were going from room to room. They walk into this room with the thief. They see him sitting with a large yarmulke, a large kippah on his head. So they assume that he's a very righteous person, and they walk further. And they open up the door of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is lying as a young man, and they see that he's not wearing a yarmulke. The yarmulke fell off. It was stolen, actually. So they start beating him, telling him that he's the thief. You're the thief. You stole the money. Where's the money? The Alter Rebbe was startled. He woke up from his sleep, and he sees that they're beating him and telling him you're the thief. And his first reaction started screaming, "Nicht dich, not I." And he's screaming, "Not I, not I, not I, not I." And finally, they said, "How do we know that it's true?" He said, "Because someone took my yarmulke, someone took my kippah, and in my kippah there's certain kameh, certain names of Hashem that I can explain what they are, and you can ask whoever stole my kippah will not know what they are." And that's what happened. They went to the other person. The Alter Rebbe identified his kippah, his yarmulke. They took it off from the thief. The thief didn't understand what those kamehs are, what those sacred names are written in the yarmulke were. They gave it back to the Alter Rebbe, and they arrested the thief. That's the story. A few days later, the Alter Rebbe came back to the Maggid, his teacher, and the Maggid told him that when I asked the question of who wrote this text, you said ich, you said I, the pronounced I. So because you pronounced your I, the ego, the I, you have to go through a process where you're screaming nishtich, not I. And that was a tikkun, that was a rectification, a correction for the screaming I. You scream that I, then there had to come up a time that you would scream not I, not I, not I. That kind of see, but this is the story. Let's try to understand a little bit, unpack the story a little bit more, and see a little bit how the deeper elements of the story become revealed. Alter Rebbe writes a book, a pamphlet on halacha, on Jewish law, which is it's a book on law, and he claims, which is rightfully so, that he says that who wrote the book when he was asked who wrote this book, who wrote this pamphlet, he says I did. So he's identifying himself and saying that he's the author, which in fact he was. He's the author of this text on law. What's the story? The story is that someone breaks the law, steals, and the Alter Rebbe himself is accused for the person who broke the law, and he has to scream nishtich. So they're contrasted. These two parts of the story are contrasted. Here he's coming and he's writing a story. He's writing a book about law, and he claims that it's I. And then the tikkun for that, the rectification for that story, is that he has to come into a situation where he's accused of breaking law. The law is lo signav, you should not steal, with all the implications of what that means and all the details of what does it mean not to steal. That's the law. That's the premise. That's the absoluteness of the law. And the story is that he has to undo his saying of ich as I by saying nishtich, not I, through the story of the idea of breaking the law. This theme of nishtich and not I is a very prominent idea in the teachings of Maggid, which we spoke about in the past a few times, that the teachings of the Maggid is all about ayin. It's all about the idea of not I. This story is very reminiscent of a similar story with the story of Rabbi Aaron Gadol of Karlin, a similar story that someone comes to him at night, and it was a good friend of his, and he says, the guy knocks on the door of Rabbi Aaron opens, says, who's there? And the guy says, I, because it's his friend. He says, you know I am, I. And the Rabbi Aaron doesn't open the door. And finally, he does open the door. He says, didn't we learn by our Rebbe, by our teacher, by the Magid of Mezritch, that there is no I, there is no ich, nishtich. This is a theme that's very much repeats itself over and over and over again. Teres Maggid, the teachings of the Maggid is about the idea of ayin, about nothingness. Contrast to the teachings of the Baal Shem is full about yeshness. The teachings of the Maggid is very much about ayin. So this is the classical story, but let's try to understand the deeper part of the story, which is about law and absence of law, and also that the Alter Rebbe is sleeping, and he's awoken from sleep, which means when you're awakened from sleep means the emergence of consciousness, of self-consciousness becomes awoken. And the first waking moment from his slumber, albeit suddenly and with a certain type of violence, that he's woken up. But the first thing that he screams is nisht, not. Nishtich, not I. If you contrast that to the morning when a person wakes up in the morning, and the first thing they say is moida ani, that I am grateful, or gratefulness maybe even comes before the I, but the I am grateful. So what is this understanding? What does it mean that I don't exist? Ich, I, and nishtich, and not I. What does that mean? The idea is, the construct is, and it's very important to understand this in terms of halacha, the world of law, that the Alter Rebbe wrote a book of law, the Shulchan Aruch. Because there are two ways that to be in this world. One is the way of a certain sense of detachment from this world, a certain level of spiritual equanimity or spiritual inwardness that allows a person to go into a state where they're completely disassociated on some level, or disconnected, or disengaged with this world, but they're living in their inner world, and therefore they collapse in a state of dveikus, of unity with the divine, that they're no longer expressive or emotive in this world. means they're going into a place of ayin within themselves, which is much more connected to the spiritual teachings of the Torah, the Pnimis HaTorah, possibly Kabbalah, maybe not Chassidus, but possibly the idea of Kabbalah. The idea is to transcend world, to be in a place of nothingness, of a sense of nothingness. But in law, in practice, which is the story that Alter Rebbe wrote this book on halacha. In halacha, it's all about the I. It's about the I encountering the ultimate I, about the I in dialogue with the Creator, with Hashem. That's the world. That's the world of halacha is all about. The world of law is the world of the manifest reality. How does a person live in this world? That's the whole question of halacha. The whole question of halacha is not a place of transcendence and dveikus, of being detached from this world and sitting in a meditative posture or in an inward position and being attached, going inward. But the idea of halacha, which is alicha, which means tnua, which is the place of movement and growth and development, is how does a person engage with the world? How does a person tie their shoes? How does a person do business? That is the world of halacha. The world of halacha is how does a person become engaged in this world? So here's almost something paradoxical. The Maggid is telling him that even in the world of halacha, even in the world of being in this world, a person has to feel themselves not that ich, not that there's an I, but nicht ich, that there is no I. That there's two ways how to think of yourself as being in this world. Even in this world, even the way we are already engaged in this world, and we're engaged with life, and we need to go to eat, and we need to sleep, which is where halacha plays itself out. In the real world, where we're experiencing reality, even in that place, the Maggid's teaching is saying, there's ani nivreis l'shamash eskoni, I am created to serve my master, which starts off with the position and the statement that there's an I, and then there's the deeper teaching, which is the other version of the end of Kedushin, ani lo nivreisi ella, I am not created, I am not, which means to serve my master, which is a person has to feel themselves, and what the Magid is telling the Alter Rebbe, is telling his student, that a person has to feel themselves that I, as an individual I, as an ego I, do not exist. Solely my purpose is to express the ultimate desire of the Creator. Not that I exist and I'm serving Hashem and I'm serving the Creator, but I don't exist. Ich nicht ich, not I. There's the non-I of self. Now, of course, there's an I. There is a self that's serving, that's doing. But it's starting from the perception that my I, my individual I, is nothing more, nothing less than expression of the ultimate I. So the only I that exists in this world, imani kan hakokan, if the ultimate I is here, then everything is here. I don't start from my individual I of self, which is I as a separate I from other I's in the universe, me as a separate ego, as a separate being from others, but I recognize that there's the ultimate I of the Creator of Ani Hashem, Anoichi Ki Ani, like the I, the ultimate I, that's beyond the I, that is reflected in all the I's of the universe, the capital I, the ultimate I, that's expressed in all I. And the relationship to life is that I recognize that I don't exist. Of course, I do exist, and I have my thoughts, and I have my feelings, I have my way of being in this world, I have my sense of humor, and I have my way of walking and talking and being my beingness in this world is in a particular way. And that's specifically tailored because that's my soul is created in a very specific way in the particularities of who I am. But I recognize that ultimately my existence is here to serve, not to serve my own selfish I, even though I'm doing things from my I, because that's the world of halacha, that's the world of doing, that's the world of participation. That's the world of awoke consciousness, when you're waking up, when you're emerging from sleep, from slumber, but it can also mean a spiritual state. When I'm emerging from a state where I'm separated from this world, that's the concept of sleeping. As I'm waking up into consciousness, the first thing that I have to recognize is that it's not me as an individual me and thinking to myself every morning when I wake up, how could I make my life, my particular life, good for myself? But my ultimate way of thinking is, how do I live my life as a Kiddush Hashem? How do I live my life to sanctify Hashem's name? How could I take all the talents and all the smarts and the intelligence and the way I understand this world? How could I serve the Creator and creation through being fully me? And then when I recognize that, it's not I as an individual I, it's not ich, I'm the author of this particular thing, even though I am, and I wrote this particular thing. In the case of the Alter Rebbe, he wrote this particular text, but it's not about him. It's about what comes through him. He's the vehicle to express the divine desire, which is that this Shulchan Aruch should be written, this code of law should be written, and he has the smarts and the intelligence, and he's this tremendous Talmud Chacham. Nachman used to call the Alter Rebbe Talmud Chacham Amiti, the true Talmud Chacham, the ultimate scholar, the ultimate Tzaddik Yisod Olam, the Sarah Torah, the Prince of Torah. The Alter Rebbe was the Prince of Torah in his time. So he was the one that can do this. He put in the effort. He had the intelligence and the brain capacity and the moichin, the godless, the greatness of his mind, and the effort that he put in studying. So he was the one that was able to create the Shulchan Aruch, and he did it. But it's nishtich. It's not the I of my grandiose visions of self. So I'm doing this to make a name for myself, to express to show off, to make a name for myself. But it's nishtich. It's not about me. It's about what comes through me. And that's what the Maggid is trying to tell him. Maggid is trying to tell him that you're going to be a great person. And Alter Rebbe was one of the greatest Jewish personalities that ever lived. You're going to become a great man. And you become a great Rebbe and a great teacher and a great Mechadash and a great philosopher and a great Mekubal. You're going to be all these great things. And you're going to achieve tremendous amount of things in this world. And your eye is going to shine. But remember that your eye is not ich. It doesn't start from the premise of I as ego. It starts from the premise of nisht. I don't exist. And in the non-existence and the bittul, in the ayin, in the state of nothingness that I am, recognition that my eye is an expression of the ultimate I, then the fullness of your eye can actually shine very beautifully. Because it's not about your ego, but it's something about it's about transcendence, and the sense of transcendence that's flowing through self. And that's what the chiddush, that's the novelty of the story. That even in the place of Shulchan Aruch, even in the place of law, even in a place where a person is engaged with this world, and that's the tachlis, that's the intention, where a person should be engaged in this world. That's where law unfolds. The world of law unfolds within the place of engagement in this world. Again, it's contrast. It's not in the world of spirituality. It wasn't a spiritual text. It wasn't the Tanya that Alter Rebbe wrote that he asked who wrote this. But it's specifically a Shulchan Aruch, a code of law. And even in that place where we're participating and we're involved in creation, and we're awoken from creation, we're said, the story is telling us that it's not about the individual I. And if it is about the I, then you're breaking the law, so to speak. It's contrast to the intention of how the law has to be practiced. And then then it shows up, God forbid, that people accuse you of theft, and the opposite of wearing a yarmulke in the narrative. And the teaching is nishtich. It's not I. It's not my individual I. It's the ultimate I that's being expressed through the I of all of my life and all my existence.